Good morning, everyone. We'll try to stay on time here, so I'd like to introduce Ryan Wisniewski. Ryan is a longtime member of the incident response and threat intelligence community. His focus over the last decade is helping cloud and SaaS companies prevent, detect, and remediate malicious activity within their environments. He currently leads one of the top cyber security research teams at Obsidian Security and with a focus of disrupting adversarial activity within SaaS environments. Please welcome Ryan.
Ooh, we're still sleepy. All right, I can't stand just standing at a podium, so I'm going to be wandering a lot, and sorry to anybody on the video on this one. Let's see here. So before we get started, any auditors in the crowd? Well, we got one. Are you with your team here? Okay, not in the room? Okay, good. So we can be honest. All right, so this talk is about SaaS. Just a real quick, who has SaaS in their environment? I'd expect almost everybody. Who here with 100% confidence can say they know all the SaaS in their environment? Yeah, again, figured. Okay. This talk is about SaaS. Oh, that's me. Yeah, I lead threat operations at a company called Obsidian. We're focused on SaaS security. That's the last you're going to hear about the company or the product. My role is we are partnered with a majority of the incident response firms around the world, such as CrowdStrike, Kroll, Wipro, GuidePoint, you name them. They're using Obsidian on the back end to ingest all the SaaS logs. We have a detection engine that runs against everything, identifies the adversaries, so they can go and remediate the client. So with that, I get all the telemetry from all the breaches in the world. Oh yeah, I don't own a suit, so I have to use an AI generator for my headshots. So if you guys need AI, yeah, use AI. So when I started at Obsidian, they asked me a simple question. Are adversaries targeting SaaS? What do you guys think? Yes, no, maybe? Yep, okay. So I did some research. I found a New York Times post that said, more SaaS apps equals more business email compromise, BEC. Okay, I can buy that. Went to some more news sites, some security sites. We got BEC. Business-led SaaS is particularly vulnerable to BEC. Wonderful. Then I went to another site, and business email compromise as SaaS is going up. So this talk is really short. SaaS compromise equals BEC. Thanks, everyone. I'm out of here. All right, so that's the first phishing exercise here. So this talk was called The SaaS and the Furious. You guys all fell for the clickbait. Here's the real talk. When BEC is no longer a BEC. So here's the real research. I started taking a look at publicly disclosed SaaS compromises in the world. And what I've saw over the last few years is this compounding exponential curve. So I went to make this slide for this year. We're not at Halloween yet, so bear in mind. But I need a new design for my chart. I'm at about 220 publicly disclosed breaches for SaaS. So are adversaries targeting SaaS? Yes. Why are adversaries targeting SaaS? That's the second question. Does anybody know why an adversary would target SaaS? Nope. Because it's easy. Easy is number one. Do we have other factors? It's everywhere. Number two. Series D security. So also, it's kind of where the data is. All right, anybody recognize this guy? Very famous bank robber. He was asked why he robs banks. He goes, that's where the money is. So if we're looking at our organizations, we're looking at kind of the adoption of SaaS. The companies that moved the data up to this SaaS landscape, and they kind of left security in behind. So we got a weak underbelly. We got sensitive data. That's going to lead to compromise. So exactly how are they doing it? Is everybody familiar with this eye chart? I see some nods. This is MITRE ATT&CK. It's a taxonomy explaining the entirety of a kill chain that an adversary is going to use to compromise business, all the way from recon to impact. Taking a look at this, it leaves out a very large portion called SaaS. So I went out to the MITRE people, and I updated all these techniques for them to include SaaS. It's an eye chart to read. So I got a simplified version of the kill chain. So with SaaS, if you're thinking about how data access is, SaaS is wonderful for businesses. It allows every user to get every data that they need as fast as possible. Every SaaS application that I've seen has a really nice search function, a really nice export function, a really nice download function, also known as recon tool, discovery tool, and exfiltration tool. The fastest compromise that I worked was 9 minutes from initial access to complete data exfiltration from a company. So how do we think about SaaS compromise compared to our on-prem counterparts? I really don't want to say it, identity is the new perimeter. I said it, bingo cards. But they're coming through identity compromises. They're not really attacking ODAs in some API that's exposed from the SaaS platform. Once in a while, they'll find an open Elasticsearch database, download everything. Maybe they find a new vulnerability in ServiceNow where a list is exposed publicly. But about 90% of the cases that I work, it's coming through identity compromise. Could be human identity, so your interactive logins. Could be shared or service accounts. Could be non-human identity, integrations. If you think about your SaaS landscape, think about all the application integrations you have into the platforms themselves. On average, I've seen about 1,000 OAuth grants in Microsoft tenants in the cases that I've worked, where 90% haven't been used in the last 90 days. When you're thinking about attack surface management, it's a huge portion of integrations into your SaaS that have access to your data, access to your configurations, that a lot of people aren't looking at. So if you're thinking about how do you gain visibility into the SaaS landscape, you can't only think about, I have Microsoft 365, that's where the data is, I need to secure that. You need to think about every integration that's coming in, every user that has access, every point that has access, and then who has access to that. So we're almost beyond third-party risk, we're in fourth-party and fifth-party risk at this time. When we think about what they're doing, so everybody here, Okta, Azure, whatever it is, you log in, you got tiles on things you have access to. Something that we noticed is adversaries no longer nmapping environments, mass scanning, nothing like that, because it doesn't work in SaaS. All they do is click the tiles. So you're going to see a rapid influx of login requests coming from the compromised user, and they just click around. They just see what they have access to. Something else that we've noticed is there's not really automation tools out there. We've seen a little bit in the Snowflake breaches earlier in the year. There was a few tools that they were using to enumerate the Snowflake databases. But really what we're seeing is hands-on keyboards. And these folks are very skilled in the SaaS apps. We have a few reasons why we believe this. Number one, if you think about it, if that's where the data is, I'm going to be a skilled adversary. I'm going to know how to use the platform. But number two, if you think about SaaS apps, almost every single one of them has a free tier or a free trial that you can get your hands on, so you can perform training for free. Back in the day of bypassing Palos or Fortinets or anything, you had to actually get your hands on a device. So either you're compromising customer devices or buying the devices from the company. With SaaS, I can spin up a free trial. I have full access to everything. I can train my adversarial campaigns now for that. So we're seeing very, very skilled actors up in this space. They look better than any admin I've ever hired in my career. So I tried to kind of organize the tactics that we're seeing based on the type of SaaS app, because there's 1,001 apps out there. There's a new one every minute, it seems. But if we start to focus in on these collaboration spaces, so your emails, your chats, your doc sharing, that kind of stuff, what we're seeing there is a lot of employee impersonation. So this is either doing your typical BEC stuff that all the news sites are talking about, the direct deposit fraud, the wire transfer fraud, that kind of stuff. But more often than not, what we're seeing is kind of this lateral movement from the initial compromise vector into, hey, IT, I need this service account request, or the service account password reset. They're doing this through ServiceNow. They're doing it through normal process and procedures. And the reason that they know about this is they're reading your documentation. So one of the first things we'll see, an adversary lands in an account, they'll go to the IT SharePoint, they'll go to the shared drives, they'll go to the place where all of the employee documentation is. They're looking to see how to register a BYOD on the network. They're looking for VPN configurations. They're looking for how to submit IT tickets. They're looking for HR new employee onboarding guides. They're looking to learn about how your organization operates so they can start to plan their exploits. So again, going back to that idea of no more Nmap, a mass scan, they're reading documentation for their recon. They're learning about the environment very quickly. We have some ideas that maybe this is backed by assisted AI tools as well, trying to parse out all of this information. We have no real evidence of that with the logs that we're getting, but at the speed in which these folks are looking at architecture diagrams and then launching their attacks, it's quite amazing. I think on average, we're seeing about 6 to 8 hours from initial access to actual impact, whether that's ransomware deployment, data exfiltration, financial fraud. So the speed in which adversaries are moving in SaaS exponentially faster than on-prem. So if you think about it, you don't have to laterally move asset to asset. You don't have to exfiltrate creds, figure out where they're working. You have a valid account already. We'll go over a couple techniques in here. This is being recorded, so I will share as much as I can. Feel free to talk to me afterwards so we can get into some more of the nitty-gritty details that I have. But if I'm looking to go super quick in an environment, I'm going to target your IT admins. I'm going to target your security architects. And something that we've seen with these advanced actors, Scattered Spider, a couple of the nation states that we deal with, they are targeting these users and they're targeting the help desk in which they work for. One of the cases that we worked, their target was a super user in Okta. And they waited for this individual to go on vacation. Individual was posting on social media about their vacation plans. They waited for pictures to show up. They called the help desk and said, hey, I'm on vacation. I got a system outage. I need to get logged in. My credentials aren't working. I'm on my sister-in-law's computer. My iPhone's not working. Can you just reset my password and my MFA credentials? And I'll go ahead and register my new one here. No problems whatsoever. Now, first red flag is, okay, how are they doing employee validation? Well, they had pretty good procedures. They asked for the individual's manager. They asked for their current address. They asked for the last 4 of Social Security. Last 4 of Social Security, publicly known due to other breaches. Adversaries have most of our Social Security numbers, so not very valid. With working with the customer, we found that previous to making their call to the help desk, their first call was to their payroll provider. They called the payroll provider directly. Hey, I just moved. I want to make sure that all my details are good. Could you update my home address for me? Sure, they update their home address. Hey, while I have you on the phone, I just want to validate all my other information is correct. Could you read off my manager and my work location and all this stuff, and I'll tell you if it's correct. So the adversary was able to gain all this information about the identity prior to calling the help desk. They were able to answer all the employee verification options, reset the password, deactivate MFA, in as Okta super user. They were able to change the authentication domains and trust a federated IDP that the adversary controlled. From there, the adversary then was able to provide positive authentication for any user to any application hosted in Okta. It's essentially a golden ticket attack. So if you're thinking about this and the speed at which all this happens, it was about 2 hours from that phone call to the help desk to complete control of the domain. And most of this was not in the SecOps stack. The logs were not being ingested. They were relying on third-party controls. Didn't know anything was happening until the ransomware launched in the VMware environment. They were down for quite a few bit. So that's kind of a couple stories here. Data repositories. We see a lot of direct exfiltration from this. One of the stories I can tell is Snowflake. There was 150-ish companies this year, lots of them public out there. And what we observed is there's a InfoStealer campaign that was running since like 2020. bunch of malware on a whole bunch of machines. And the adversaries were able to find the credentials that were valid against customer Snowflake environments, and they were single-factored to the world. Use the credentials, get in. They were using an automated recon tool that would dump all the schemas and figure out where the sensitive data is in Snowflake. And then there's a pause, and then a single select statement comes out, dumps hundreds of gigabytes right to standard output. That was the exfiltration path. And the kicker here is, if you're thinking about traditional compromise, you're going to be at the mercy of whatever the data center egress speed is. So if you're trying to pump out data from an on-prem database, you're going to be limited by whatever the company has on egress. With SaaS, with all these databases as a platform kind of idea, typically they'll auto-scale to the request. So not only is this running super fast at line rate from the SaaS provider, you're also going to have to pay for all those extra resources. You're going to pay for the networking and compute cost for that egress of your data that just got exfiltrated. Final bucket here that we have is the network and compute stacks. So this is your AWS, your GCPs, your Azures. We see a lot of pivots up here. One of the ways that we've seen adversaries gain access into this is the user is able to assume role, but more often than not, what they're doing is they're going to the Thycotics or the CyberArks, wherever the vaults are, and they're grabbing break glass accounts. They log in with the break glass account because it's typically not MFA'd, and then they're in as a super user in the environment there. From there, it's kind of normal penetration that we see in cloud space. They're looking to dump S3 buckets, copy them out, spin up virtual machines, steal credentials, et cetera. Just real quick, because that was a lot of doom and gloom. Any questions out there about anything? Yes?
How are they attacking the break glass accounts more than just going over a big password?
Yeah, so the question was, how are they attacking the break glass accounts versus just going over generic passwords? Or? Yeah, so what we'll see is typically the identity. So if they're talking about the identity compromise here, they got an IT admin or somebody with elevated privileges. They'll log into the password vault themselves, and they'll search for the break glass. So they'll find the AWS break glass account, the Azure break glass account. They'll copy those credentials out. Typically, the break glass accounts, they're not multi-factored, because that's the whole purpose of a break glass account is if your MFA provider's down, how do you get in the environment? So they'll come in, they'll just use those credentials and log in. And at that point, they typically have some type of super IAM role, and they can do whatever they want from there. They can spin up new credentials, they can spin up new users, they can just access stuff directly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. It's a compromise of the password vault.
Yeah, so you can think about it as a compromise of a password vault, but it's really that identity. So once they get in as the IT user, that's all going to be valid traffic and valid authorizations and everything because they have that account. So you can almost think of it as like an insider threat because that user is now malicious. So it's from a security perspective, if you're just looking at like, is my password vault compromised? You're not going to see it just with the password vault logs because it's just going to look like valid IT user account. Make sense? Cool. Any other questions out there? Cool. I do have example kill chains, cool. All right, so something interesting that I've noted is in typical on-prem compromise, typical traditional threat actor capabilities, there's a playbook. They're going to come in through a phishing attack. They're going to launch Mimikatz. They're going to pivot to the domain controller, yada, yada. We all know that story. What we found is there's no correlation between the initial access vectors that they're using to breach that initial account and what playbook they're going to run afterwards. Conversely, we've actually noticed that they're just very, very good at using what they have. So if they land in like a sales manager account, typically they'll just pivot straight to Salesforce, dump Salesforce. If they land in an IT admin role, they're going to try to open up the environment, launch the ransomware. If they're landing in like an HR role, they're going to look at dumping W-2s, performing tax fraud there. So really what they're doing is they're just being very opportunistic if we hold the targeted stuff off to the side. It's very opportunistic, e-crime type of things. So as we're going through these, think of these as kind of Lego bricks, and the adversaries are just kind of plugging and playing their Legos as they're going around the adversary. But I want to give some color and just try to tell the story. So we'll start with adversary in the middle of the financial fraud. Is everybody kind of well versed in this idea of adversary in the middle attacks? I see a few nods. I'll go into details. So first time I saw this was, I think, 2016. When MFA became kind of the new thing on this is the silver bullet, it's going to stop everything. I was on a red team, and we figured out how to bypass MFA. And it's really easy. All you have to do is control the point in which the user's authenticating, and then forward that over to the IDP itself. So you stand up a reverse proxy, you host a phishing page, you phish the user enters their credentials. Because you're sitting in the middle there and you own both endpoints, you send that to the IDP on behalf of the user. The MFA prompt will go, you proxy that back and forth, and once all the authentication is done, the IDP is going to send you the authentication cookie. Since you're in the middle, you steal that authentication cookie. You can now access that session as the user. So at that point, you got full control of that user. You can go click on those Okta tiles or the Azure tiles and go access all the accounts based on the user. So if you've heard of EvilJinx, Tycoon, we're tracking a few other phishing as a service kits. It's really what they're doing now. There's a few, I'll put them in quotes, companies out there that host phishing as a service kits that the adversaries are using. Last I saw it was like $13 a month to host this. They keep them up to date. They're using legitimate SDKs from Okta and Microsoft to really make the page look good, make sure everything's working. But yeah, these are very, very effective. About 40% of the cases that we work include some type of adversary in the middle proxy. Recently, we've seen advanced attackers also boost their success rating on this by calling the victim user first. Hey, this is Nancy from HR. We need to validate some of your information. We're going to send you a text message right now with a link. It's going to prompt you to enter your credentials. Once you do that, you'll be able to access your Workday account and just validate all your information. Does that sound good? Okay, here comes the link. Sends it to the user's phone. Phones typically don't have all the MDM and everything on there. User clicks, brings them to the company's login page. Of course, it's not. It's our adversary in the middle page. They enter their credentials. They accept the MFA prompt. Boom, adversary's in. For persistence mechanisms, if you think about on-prem, we're going to drop something in scheduled task or drop something in the kernel bootloader. What we're doing up here in the SaaS accounts, we're just going to add our own MFA. This way I don't have to phish the user anymore. I got the credentials from the adversary in the middle page. Now I just need to be able to answer all those stupid prompts that come up that we all love. So I'm just going to register my own MFA device. This is typically going to be the software-based authenticator for the IDP itself. So if it's Okta, it's going to be the Okta push notification. If it's Microsoft, it'll be Microsoft Authenticator. Defense evasion, they're typically going through the victim's email box and deleting out any of the security notifications they generated coming in. So new device detected, new login location detected. They'll go and delete all those out. MFA resets, anything that they're doing, they're deleting those out of the user's inbox. And then they're going to set up very targeted rules to hide any additional security notifications that they might generate. In financial fraud cases, we'll see these typically targeted either at their victim that they're going to send the falsified invoice to, or it will be the HR representative if they're going to do a direct deposit fraud. Yes, sir?
On those push notifications, aren't both devices normally going to get the push notification and somebody will know that they didn't ask for it?
So the question is, on the push notifications, are both devices, both the victim and the malicious actor device, going to get the push notification? You can choose on most IDPs on which device to send the push notification to. So on the push notification, they select their adversary one, send it out there, user won't get it.
Okay, so it's not a default to send it. All right.
Yes, exactly. It's not default. It's they're going to pick, send this to me, not victim. But yeah, so yeah, inbox rules, they're going to hide anything that's coming at them. So if I'm going to do payroll fraud, I'm going to hide the payroll administrator emails coming back to me. Interesting thing here, so a lot of the out-of-the-box detections, they're looking for delete all emails. They're looking for mark all as read. So what the adversaries are doing is they're actually moving the selected emails to folders that are pre-created, like RSS subscriptions, conversation histories, things that typically users don't look at. So the rule, instead of deleting them coming in, they're hiding them in these system default folders. Discovery, like I said, they're searching. Every SaaS app that I've looked at has a search functionality. They're looking for whatever data they are. If they're in an inbox, typically like on a typical BEC commodity actor, you're going to see searches for invoices, wire transfer, payroll, direct deposit, anything there. On more of the targeted, you might see searches for passwords. You might see searches for documentation or IT stuff if they're trying to look there. Typically, we'll see those out in SharePoint or OneDrive, though. And then the impact for this one, this was wire transfer instructions. They had a legitimate bank account at the bank that the company was using for wire transfer, but they changed the account on it. So, for example, this was Chase Bank, let's say. They had a legitimate account at Chase Bank. Whole another side of the story about money muling and everything on how they get legitimate people to collect the money. But they have bank accounts and they're matching the target bank accounts to make it less suspicious. So it just looks like an account change. Number 2, SSPR. SSPR, self-service password reset. Is that nomenclature yet? All right, I see some nods. So this is the password reset button on any login page, forgot my password flows, whatever it might be. We found that adversaries, we started tracking this last July, so 2023 July. We found a specific threat actor was enumerating Microsoft login pages, specifically the self-service password reset flows, looking for people with call verification or SMS OTP for the reset verification process. What they were doing then is they would perform the SIM swap on the back end for that device to intercept the code. So anybody that doesn't know what they're doing, this is the reset password flow. They say, hey, we're going to send a code to 1234567 password. You enter the code. You can reset the password then. So this particular actor is very, very good at SIM swapping. There's a few speculations on how they're doing it. Got the news stories up there, but just assume that your SIM device could be swapped. It's not secure anymore. Move off SMS if you can. Persistence, it's going to be the same persistent mechanism. About 85% of the cases that we work, we see a malicious MFA device registered. So if you're looking kind of for that single silver bullet in what to detect, watch the MFA. Here's screenshots of the tiles that I keep talking about. So threat actor comes in and clicks on every single tile to see what they have access to, what levels of access they have, and then depending on the actor, we might see multiple hands on keyboard come up. And how you can tell in the logs is you'll see the same session token start popping up from multiple IP addresses accessing different applications. So you'll see, session 1234 spawn a new instance of Box from, let's say, Nigeria. And then another session from 1234 spawn a Workday session that's working up in California. And you start to look at all this and it just doesn't make sense. Sometimes you'll see the user agents swap out too. So as you're correlating all this data together, you can start to infer certain things. And we'll see multiple threat actors working on the same account sometimes to really speed up their attack and maximize damage. So again, download. There's only so many ways I can say they log in and download your data. Exfiltration, they're just going to press the download button. They're going to share links. One case we worked, large financial institution, they were able to phish VP, president, somewhere high up, and all they did was right-click on his OneDrive folder and say share publicly. So they were able then to come in with guest accounts, download all the data out of the OneDrive. And then, yeah, they just download the data again. SaaS makes it really easy to download data. Here's a couple examples out here, but it's becoming a thing. As we make our data easily accessible by all of our employees, we're doing the same thing for the threat actors. This one's a good one. Help desk, ransomware. This kill chain got pretty popular after the MGM story hit the news last year. Very similar copycat attacks that we've observed. This is going back to that idea. There's an IT admin at a target company. He posts some vacation pictures. Something industry, so AI is becoming a thing as well in phishing attacks. I think we've all known that AI is being used to generate the emails, text messages. We are starting to hear voice clones, and we're also seeing in very targeted video as well. So think about your help desk verification systems. If you're hopping on a Zoom chat, think about how you can start to update those procedures to defeat any type of AI bots that you might encounter. Persistence, they're registering MFA devices. Discovery, they're searching. So lateral movement, this is an interesting one. So again, when a BEC is not a BEC, I log in, I got the user's identity. Most companies that I've worked with, their VPNs are tied into SSO. So if I have your SSO account, I can click on the VPN, I can pivot internally. We're seeing 35%, I think it is, at this point, of this year's compromises resulting in ransomware from a SaaS compromise. So being able to really tie together all of your SaaS identities, all the logs there, to your internal, is going to be key kind of moving forward to give you that full visibility on where they're coming in. I've worked with a few companies where they kept getting back in, they couldn't figure out the initial access vector. Threat actor was in their GitHub. They had personal keys out there, so personal access tokens. If anybody has a GitHub environment they're defending, personal access tokens, the bane of our existence. So just not having the visibility into those logs, they couldn't figure out how they're getting back in until we got that. Ransomware is rough. I think we all know that now. Ransomware has been kind of the king of the last 20 years, driving security throughout organizations. Here's some examples that started from SaaS and pivoted down. Here's a screenshot slides. Make sure I covered everything. What are some other tips I can say? Oh, so something that we're seeing a lot, this is 80% plus of the compromises. Origination of the attacker is going to be a residential proxy or a commercial VPN, like a NordVPN, ExpressVPN, something like that. They're using this to get around your conditional access policies. Typically what they'll do is they will figure out where your headquarters are and pick residential proxies or VPN egress points around there, knowing that they can't block Comcast or Cox or any of those other communications, telecoms, and then they'll come right in through your conditional access. Some other key things here that I didn't write down. Registering devices. This has kind of been an uptick over the last 3 to 6 months. So again, they're looking at your documentation, they're looking at BYOD, how to register. So Intune, if you allow your users to register devices in Intune and you're basing conditional access policies off of registered devices, watch those. We've seen threat actors register their own devices there. So we've seen Intune, Workspace ONE. I think those are the only two kind of big MDMs that we've seen used in attacks. But that way then, they're a managed device, they're usually getting in through those policies. We'll also see them use VDI infrastructure. So if you think about conditional access policies or some type of network policy that you have, maybe their device isn't allowed on, they're coming from residential proxy, you need to be inside the corp VPN. They'll find a device that they have access to and then leverage that to get into your sites. Any questions, comments, anything out there? I'm going to keep rambling otherwise. There's another screenshot slide for you. What do we do about this? Lock down your MFA policies. Make sure that those are as tight as possible. Think about authentication. Think about password resets. Think about all those help desk process procedures. Think about least privileges. We've been talking least privileges from the 60s on, right? We haven't really applied that to SaaS. Typically, you got an identity, you log into SaaS, you have access to all the data. It's really like, if we think about 15 years ago in the on-prem space, as long as you're on the VPN, if you're on the corporate network, you have access to all the file shares, documents, whatever, databases, SQL command lines. So really, it's the same story again and again. Now it's just in another space. So identity has always been the perimeter. We've just been really good at being lazy and mitigating it with VPNs or network policies, physical access if we go way back when. But really, nothing's changed. Adversary playbook, log in, steal the data, cause havoc. Yeah, that's really the talk. I really don't like being gloom and doom. There's a lot of stuff we can do. Make sure you're correlating all your data. Make sure you got detections for this stuff that I covered. Other than that, I want to thank everybody here. Any other questions that I can answer? Happy to tell war stories otherwise. Yes, sir? How long until we can't defeat AI? Maybe the... Yeah, they're making videos to break MFA, 100%. It's a thing, right? It's been a thing. It's now becoming a bigger thing. So, yeah, we're just going to have to keep adapting. I know it's a similar conversation on quantum and encryption, right? Technology is going to continue to adapt. We need to adapt with it. So, you know, just think about... Right. Understand your threat vectors, understand your mitigations, figure out the best way to secure your environment, right? Air gap, everything. Pen and paper.
Have you ever seen any AI attacks where they grab, you know, like someone's voice off of like TikTok videos or something like that and do like an AI clone of it, like call the help desk with that person?
Yeah, so the question was, are we seeing AI voice clones? And the answer is yes, especially with some systems where they're using voice as an authentication mechanism. So there are certain help desks at companies, financial institutions, et cetera, where they've trained on your voice to provide a layer of authentication. So if I call into my bank, let's say, maybe their system is looking at my phone number, my location, and my voice model to authenticate myself, so they don't have to go and ask my social security, my credit card, whatever it is. We are seeing attacks on that to get into those types of systems.
So to your point of having a secure method before you change MFA, what do you consider secure voice as a part of those?
Yeah, so the question is, for changing MFA, what are secure mechanisms? In some of the cases that we worked where advanced adversaries are in there, we've required everybody come in the office and physically register. Understanding that that's not ideal for a remote workforce especially, you're going to have to think about novel ways where either it's going to be something that you know the adversary doesn't know, some type of secret magic word or something. I know this is going way back. This is like 2010. I ran into a company that was using the wiki page, the background on the wiki page would rotate every day to a random color. And that is what the help desk was using to validate that you were actually the employee. So they're like, hey, what's the color of the day? And it'd be like, oh, it's red. So silly things like that, we might have to become more novel into and think about how do we start to expand that and make that more of an automated, scalable capability. But we're really going to have to think about how do we validate identity with the remote workforce. Because they're getting in with the MFAs, because AI voice cloning, because AI video cloning, we're going to have to really think as an industry on how do we solve this problem of authentication and identity. How can we train our staff to be more security aware, especially like help desk and everybody, right? So does anybody out there have training awareness programs that actually work? We got a couples. So it's a tough one. I mean, so anybody out there have young kids that are going through school? How do you train kids? You know, it's incentive based. It's not punishment based. Punishments don't work. So the comment was, let their Instagram account get hacked, and they'll be super security mindset. Some things that I've seen work is along those lines is how do you make it personal? People that have their bank accounts taken over, people that have their actual identities stolen, all of a sudden they have a shift in mindset. They're not sharing information anymore. They're not applying for 35 credit cards. They're not willy-nilly just sharing details. It's really our job to make it real for everybody and really get them to understand the why. Not to get Simon Sinek on you, understand the why. Make sure that everybody is aligned to that and just continue on that. But yeah, it's, traditional training methods I believe there's a few articles out there that have shown that they're pretty ineffective. security and awareness training, the clicking through, the computer-based testing just really isn't driving the point home. We got to figure out how to tell that story and make it real. Yeah, steal the CEO's identity. Good luck with that one. Go back a slide, of course. That one? That one. John.
Isn't there a way to, I mean, Dun & Bradstreet's out of hand, but doing postal mail MFA to your home mailing address to verify your identity?
Postal mail MFA. We could do it.
They still do.
Yeah, right.
3
It's-
or 4 other agencies still mail you your house to see if you're still there.
Correct.
Is there a way to do that with SaaS?
That would be interesting. So the question, or so the comment is, there are agencies that still mail, like physical mail through snail mail to validate identity and stuff like that. How do we do that with SaaS? I don't know if my CEO would be okay with snail mail as the time to authenticate. It's slow, right? So we're going to need to innovate in the space and just provide that same level of scrutiny to anything that we're doing, but at the speed of SaaS. The comment is, with mail, it's trivial to set up forwards, it's easy to steal. If we're working advanced nation state, they might have somebody sitting outside your house. I mean, I got a tinfoil hat in the backyard, but, depending on your threat models and just how you're thinking about the space, yeah, invest, invest, invest. Anybody else? Yeah. So the comment is, Social Security Office just sent a snail mail with a code, and I have 60 days to authenticate with that code. I'm sure nothing can go wrong there. Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right, folks. Thank you so much. You guys have been a great crowd. We got a packed house. Enjoy the rest of the time at CornCon.